Hello, Whovians, and welcome back to the main channel. Yes, I am back with more main channel things. Yes. Now, slight admin, I have been away lately, so that means my review of Lucky Day will be coming soon. Very, 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 very soon. Sooner than Saturday, because that's when the next episode comes out, but it's very soon, as in soon, soon. So, anyway, without further ado, let's get on and crack on with my guest today. It's a wonderful interview, as always, but my guest today is best known for writing on the Churchill Years, Volume 2. It's the one and only Ian McLaughlin.
Hello, hello. How you doing?
All right. So let's start at the very beginning because Julie Andrews keeps on saying it's a good place to start. I haven't disagreed with her so far. So how did you get into the world of writing?
I was 18. I left school. I was on my way to university, and my mother's job ceased to exist. So I thought, oh, I'd better make some cash. And a job came up at a publisher called DC Thompson to publish comics. So I thought, I'll go and be a journalist for a couple of years because they do comics, they do newspapers. I'll go be with them. So I went there, aged 18 in 1985, and I stayed there until I was a senile old geriatric in 2014. I had my chances to go and do other things in London, but I was working on comics like the Beano, the Dandy, the Beezer, Commando, and I absolutely fell in love with the job. I fell in love with being able to write for Dennis the Menace, Backstreet Kids, Banana Man, all of that. And I just discovered that this is great. Plus, there were chances for me to be doing other things while I was there. We were involved with movies and TV shows that might or might not happen based on our characters. There was radio adaptations as well. So I was getting involved with all of that. And I just thought, this is the greatest job in the world. I am being paid to be an 8-year-old. So I stayed there for almost 30 years until they threw me out. I think they'd finally worked out that I was a pain in the bum and they decided to send me freelance.
Yeah.
But while I was still there, I'd started writing other things. I'd tried some things with BBV back at the turn of the 90s. And around 2000, I thought I'd annoy Gary Russell with some scripts for Big Finish. So I did. And I think just to make me go away, he took Eye of the Scorpion on, and we did that in 2001. That's the very short potted version, which might not be as short and potted as you were hoping for.
And before you started working with Big Finish, were you a big fan of Doctor Who in general?
My favorite TV show ever, ever, ever. Um, it's my favorite thing ever. I used to watch it with my dad, uh, going back to when we only had a black and white TV, and I remember crying tears. It was tears and snot when John Pertwee left us. I've hated spiders ever since. I've adored Doctor Who since then. Possibly my earliest memory is being terrified of the sea devils coming out of the sea. I remember watching the second Peter Cushing movie on TV around 74. Uh, I remember seeing all of that and I just loved every bit of it. But I became a huge, huge fan in about 1976, summer 1976, July, I think, because we were on a family holiday in Inverness
Yeah.
and we went to the John Mingus shop and they had these books with Tom Baker's face on the front and it said Doctor Who, Doctor Who and the Loch Ness Monster, Doctor Who and the Genesis of the Daleks. In the 2 weeks we were there, I think I bought and read 9 of them.
Wow.
That was that long hot summer of 1976 for me was when I found the Target books and Doctor Who became my thing.
Yeah,
It was the thing that meant everything to me.
yeah. And because you were a fan of the show and everything that it comes with, do you think that helped you when it came to writing for Doctor Who because you had a vast knowledge of what was already there?
I think it helped for me to have, and it always helps to have some knowledge of what you're writing about. But the initial thing is, I don't think a writer should ever want to just write Doctor Who. A writer should want to write and write stories.
Yeah,
So I always wanted to write other things as well. It's just there was a chance to write Doctor Who, and I was, God, I wanted to do it. I really did. It's it's been the thing I love, and I was desperate to do it. So when I was writing it, I did feel I had an understanding of the characters.
yeah,
I had an understanding of what they would and wouldn't do, what the universe would and wouldn't take.
yeah,
So I thought I had a certain knowledge that made it a little bit easier. But I also had absolutely no knowledge of writing audio,
yeah,
which is why Gary Russell was so immensely kind and helpful and absolutely wonderful in helping me do things that I had no idea how to do.
yeah. Yeah, and one of the other things you've worked on within the realms of audio and Doctor Who, which I think is one of the most inventive things that Big Finish have come up with, because it's you wouldn't expect it to be a thing that people want to listen to, but it really is. What was it like working on the Churchill Years Volume 2?
That was really quite interesting because Churchill was. I live in Dundee,
Yeah,
up here in the beautiful east coast of Scotland. It's just gone cloudy, but normally it's sunny here. I swear to you, it never rains in Dundee. That's a lie. It's a lie. Um, but Churchill was our member of Parliament,
yeah,
and he had a huge disagreement with my former employers, DC Thomson, to the point that Thomsons wouldn't name him in their papers
mm,
when he was the MP,
yeah,
and he got run out of town for being such an awful MP. He was, I mean, the truth is, he was pretty much running through the streets to get to the train station, and he said he'd never come back. He hated the place. He absolutely hated the place. And he was replaced by a fella called Ned Scrimgeour, who beat him in an election, the only temperance MP to ever sit in Parliament.
yeah,
And I can just imagine the pain Churchill felt being replaced by somebody who was preaching abstinence and not drinking.
yeah,
So I found that amusing, and I thought, oh, he hated my bosses, he hated my city, so I've got to bring him back to this city. I
yeah,
absolutely have to bring him back to Dundee because he hated us. He said he'd let the grass grow before he ever came back here. He let the grass grow in the street.
yeah,
So I thought, oh, I'm definitely bringing him back here because he'll be miserable. So I did. And I actually, there's a mention that he goes into a city centre office. Well, he actually sat at my chair in what used to be the Beezer office,
yeah,
although at the time it would have been the Beano office. But I took a lot of my knowledge of my home city and of Churchill, and I thought, I'm using all of that. I'm having fun with that. But in the middle of all that, you've got a guy who for all that I think he was quite a terrible human being by all accounts. He was a wonderful wartime leader.
yeah,
So he's a very complex character to look at. And I thought, the Doctor is going through PTSD pretty much. And he's watching somebody in the middle of war and he's suffering having come out of a war. It's got to
yeah,
be really interesting to put those two together and how do the experiences of one feed into the other. And that was what I tried to get.
yeah. And do you think that it was a lot harder to write for someone that, even though he was a real person in history, he's got a different personality in a sci-fi context for Doctor Who. Do you think that was harder to do because you had to battle with two versions of the same character?
Not really. I didn't try to write for the real Churchill. I wrote for Ian McNeece's Churchill.
Yeah,
I heard Ian McNeece's voice rather than actual Churchill.
yeah,
I've got, there's other stuff I've written in World War II. I write a lot about World War II. So I have a lot of Churchill's speeches on as MP3s
yeah,
uh, because it's really useful to scatter in bits of real Churchill if you're, well, the cheeky thing is if you're looking at up your word count a little bit, but it's also, it gives it a bit of reality.
yeah.
Um, so I know Churchill's voice quite well, but this had to be Ian McNeece's voice because it's not the same character. It's an iteration of someone very similar, but I wrote it purely for the performance rather than for the real character.
And I think that that's what makes Doctor Who, especially in the realm of Big Finish, so successful because it can give characters more time to flesh them out. And do you think that that's what helps characters like Churchill become so more popular with the audience because he's got time to flesh them out and time to get under the skin of who the character really is?
I think being willing to give performers a lot to do helps.
Yeah,
A lot of these characters who come in to Doctor Who and New Who get time to breathe.
yeah,
They get time to become people rather than just being, I do apologize for my phone going off, rather than just being ciphers for the story moving along to the next cliffhanger. You've got time to get into their heads, to spend time with them, to actually see what they feel, what they think of people. You get to know you get to know what's going on inside them, and they cease to be just characters on TV. You can actually feel with them. And once you actually get to extended media like Big Finish, like novels, you can really have a lot of fun there. I think that's a huge part of Doctor Who. It's one of the huge benefits of Doctor Who. I think probably Star Trek's the only one that I know that I follow that gives characters that kind of depth elsewhere.
yeah. And one of the other things you've worked on that I think if you ask a Doctor Who fan, they would also regard this as well beloved because if you love one sci-fi, you're bound to love others, and well, it depends on who's worked on the others. You can sometimes see connections. But what was it like working on the Big Finish adaptation or version, if you will, of the world of Blake Seven?
Joyful. Again, Blake Seven started when I was 11, and it was on a night that my dad got home from work, and we'd sit and watch that together. It was often paired with Dallas, so I would be watching both of them with my dad, and it would just be him and me in the house. So I have a huge emotional connection to it
Yeah,
because that was an incredibly special thing for me. Just me and my old man having a laugh, watching this, and it was glorious. I loved it. And I got into the videos when they came out back in the, right, I was working on the Beezer, so it would have been early 90s.
yeah,
So I always had a thing for it. I've got the novels just here. Love it. Uh, and when the offer came to write for it, I was always thinking I've got to write for Villa because I adore Villa. I get Villa. I understand him. He's a he's smart. He he's kind of a coward, but he's also I think he's smart enough to get himself away from trouble, and he occasionally doesn't. So is he a full-on coward? But then again, I always go back to my favorite episode, which was Orbit,
yeah,
which I found absolutely terrifying because one of the good guys was the threat to
yeah,
Villa. And I thought Robert Holmes' script for that was quite extraordinary. So I always thought I'm doing Villa, and if I can pair Villa up with Avon at any point, I will do. So I was incredibly fortunate that my three stories were all villa stories. And in a couple of them, he did get to get paired up with uh, Avon. In
Yeah,
particular, the last one, The Hunted, which was basically a World War II submarine film
yeah,
turned into an audio, which was exactly what I wanted it to be.
yeah. And why do you reckon that Blake Seven is so beloved, not just to Doctor Who fans, but to people in general?
I think it's people love Star Trek because it's got optimism and adventure and all that. Blake Seven's kind of the grubby underside of Star Trek. It's it's more realistic. I mean, authoritarian federation, yeah. Authoritarian is starting to be a word we hear an awful lot in the world today. And I think it resonates because there was a lot of that authoritarian stuff, and the uniforms were very Nazi-like. So in 1978, a lot of people still had a really strong remembrance for the fascism of the 40s and 30s.
Yeah,
And I think we should still all remember that and be utterly terrified of it.
mm,
So I think there's a lot of the past in it. But I also think for a lot of us of my age, I look back at it and there's a huge nostalgia for it because this this show was not Star Trek, but it was kind of like Star Trek. It wasn't Doctor Who, it was kind of like Doctor Who, and it was totally its own thing as well.
yeah,
It was probably my first real exposure to what you call dystopian uh, fiction.
yeah,
Oh, the future doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to be wonderful. And heroes don't have to be brighter than bright and shinier than being scrubbed with Persil all day.
yeah,
These people are, the heroes in this are breaking the law. Well, that's kind of cool. The heroes in this are, frankly, terrorists. Now, there's something to take a look at. Your heroes are terrorists. That's quite a complex thing to be talking about. So I think it's a very complex show that also just gives you really good adventures.
yeah,
Um, One of the stories that I wanted to do for Big Finish and I was working on, but it never got made because Gareth Thomas passed, was one that was, I think, just called Terrorist. And it would have been an examination of how people viewed uh, Blake's crew.
yeah,
Were they freedom fighters or were they terrorists? I'm sad we never got anywhere with that. It was going to be really interesting to do and a lot darker than any of the other ones I did.
yeah. And I say this quite a lot because I think that it really does resonate with it. But do you think that because of obviously Big Finish and other companies and other outlets trying to do the same with like audio dramas becoming more popular, do you think that having Blake Seven and audio helps make the brand more popular and more recognizable to young people that might stumble across it and go, oh, that's interesting? Do you think that it's a positive turn that it's got this new life on audio?
It has to be. Because with the best will in the world, it's a TV show that's heading up for being 50 years old.
Yeah,
And you can't look at 50-year-old TV and say, that's shiny and new. Even when they did up the special effects on the original series of Star Trek,
yeah,
you went from wonderful, shiny new special effects to, yeah, that's a 1960s bridge set. This Blake Seven on TV, I think, was great. It was dystopian, it had grunge. The fourth series had, I think, designers taking drugs when they did some of the hairstyles and fashion choices. But, it was the early 80s, and none of us can hold our hands up and say, I looked that great in 1981.
yeah,
We all had bad fashion choices back then. I certainly did. I had really bad hair. I had hair back then, just
yeah,
long, long hair. So it looks it looks dated now. There's no point in hiding that. Even the special effects just look really dated. But you can tell that there's a thought behind it. There's a really good concept behind it. And if you can give that concept to an audience today in a format that doesn't show its weaknesses, and you can bring them in, showing them a version of it that's showcasing its strengths,
Yeah,
then you can say, here's the older stuff. It doesn't look shiny and bright, but go with the ideas. Go
yeah,
with the ideas, and you'll see it's the same ideas that are in the stuff you've enjoyed on audio. It's just that the sets, they didn't have money,
yeah.
but they had imagination and they had talent and they had wit and they had great writers. They had some really great writers on the show.
And when you look back at the audio world, do you think that it's becoming more popular, not just because there's more venture in audio, but do you think that Big Finish are also in mix in helping make sure that audio is still as popular as TV and film?
I think I write for radio in America sometimes. I've
Yeah,
written mystery plays, Sherlock Holmes, and a radio series called Carides the Thinker.
yeah,
I've also done some horror stuff for them. And over there with this wonderful company I work with, you're aware that radio and audio for a long time was viewed as the poor relation.
yeah,
And that always saddened me because my first real exposure to radio was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And then I discovered Test Match Special, which became my favourite comedy thing.
yeah,
And then I discovered I'm Sorry, I Haven't a Clue and stuff like that. So Radio 4 has always been incredibly important to me, but it didn't have the stuff that I was really into.
mm,
When Big finished, actually, we'll say Audio Visuals first, did
yeah,
some glorious stuff back in the 80s. And then when Big Finish came along with this, I think they proved that there's a real way to get this to a market that's profitable, that actually gets it to an audience that wants it.
yeah,
And a lot of companies, I think, have taken a look at what Big Finish did and thought, you know what? There is an audience for this stuff. There
yeah,
is an audience for audio drama. There is an audience for podcasts. There is an audience for people just listening. And I think Audible, uh, for whom I think I have just written an audio play, uh, I think Audible have done very, very well
yeah,
in taking on everything that Big Finish have done and doing it on an even larger scale.
yeah,
There are other companies coming along, like I think Pocket FM are doing drama, but their stuff isn't really my niche. But I think there's a lot of people discovering that audio drama really is for them. And
yeah,
Big Finish were pretty much the point of the arrow in driving forward and proving that to people because they
yeah,
did it. They were, what, 1998 was the first Benny? Was it 97 or 98? I actually have the first Bennies right in front of me. Um, they were great. They were
yeah,
fabulous. That first Benny play, oh no, it isn't, was joyfully filthy.
yeah.
Um, and it, for me, that proved, oh, this is all going to work fine. This is great. And I think it proved the same to a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think that you listen to Big Finish and not just and all the other stuff, not just the sci-fi intake, and you sort of see where the medium can go. And then when you listen to Audible doing the Treacle People and doing Buffy, and you sort of sense that audio at one point when t- TV is like really popular, but I think the audio, the drama world, and the more of the creative side of audio, not just podcasts, I think is growing, and I think that's a good thing. And I think that having well-known properties are there to help show that there is stuff there. And do you think that that's a good thing having the well-known properties at the heart of it so that people know where to go into it.
If you've got something like Star Trek and Doctor Who and Buffy, and you've got a huge market that loves that stuff,
Yeah,
right? We're going here to look at this. And then you put all your other stuff around it, and you go, wait a minute, look at that. That's interesting. I'm going to take a look at that. I'll take a listen to that. If you can use the big names to pull
yeah,
people in, that's a huge piece of marketing. Um, Also, it helps. I think that Big Finish generally do great stuff. I think Audible generally do really good stuff. Quality always helps. Quality is incredibly important, but the quality, once you've used that to drag people in, then you can point them at other things and you can make them audio, radio, podcast fans, whatever you want to call it. But I think the important thing is to drag them in, and that's where the name franchises come in.
yeah. And one of the other things you've worked on recently that I think is a whole was a popular TV show, B, a popular set of audios, and now I think it's going to be more popular in a book form. What was it like working on the Tomorrow People, Children of Evolution?
That was just bliss.
Yeah,
Absolutely glorious. Um, I'd always had a feeling that I was going to be this close to writing Tomorrow People and
yeah,
never get there. Back in the 90s, when the 90s TV series happened,
yeah,
uh, I suggested to my bosses at DC Thompson that we do an annual based on it. And my friend Dan McGahey, who is a magnificent writer, he's a brilliant writer. He was also on the comics at that time, and he put together a far more detailed proposal for it that would have tied together the 70s Tomorrow People with the 90s Tomorrow People.
yeah,
He gave it so much more thought than I did, and his was a much better idea. But we thought, we've got a chance here, and we didn't go for it. And then I was asked to do an episode of the Big Finish seventh series of Tomorrow People. And I worked with my friend Claire Bartlett on a script called The Screaming Planet,
yeah,
which would have been about a planet of people who were telepaths and they were all unconscious. And the Tomorrow People had to go there and find out why. And we'd find something out, and it would come back later in a script Joe Lidster was going to write. And it got cancelled just before the contracts came out for us to write that. So I thought, right, that's it. Never getting to write the Tomorrow People, a TV show for which I used a cassette box, a coin, and a nail to build my version of one of the original jaunting belts. Because I was about 6 or 7 at the time. It
yeah,
was before they went to the really snazzy black and white ones.
yeah,
Oh, sorry. Um, I loved the show. I loved the idea of being able to jaunt. And as I look back on it now, I look back on it and think, oh, it's really interesting that humanity is evolving. And one of our evolutions is that we lose our violence and we become more empathic. Oh,
yeah,
that's really good. So when I got the chance to do a novella for it, I just jumped at it.
yeah,
Um, I had it about 3/4 written before the contract arrived. I just jumped at it, told Barnaby what I wanted the title to be and what it was roughly about. He told me to just get on with it. Children of the Evolution kind of fit. It was also a riff on a 1970s song by T-Rex,
yeah,
uh, which was a band we all loved in the 70s. Uh, Nostalgia. Um, but I got to revisit the 70s, and in my head, I was seeing, what the world was like back then, going back into my memories, going back to how I felt watching the show, and telling the story that I kind of saw as a four-parter on TV.
yeah,
It was just joyful. It was a wonderful experience to do. And I was very lucky that Paul Simpson was editing it, and he's a fabulous pair of hands. He's incredibly safe,
Yeah.
and picked up mistakes I made and fixed them without making me feel like a twit.
And whilst you were writing the book, did you go back and rewatch the show to try and get a better to try and keep it in your head so that you knew exactly where you needed to go, or did you know enough about it already just to be able to it was fresh in your mind and you knew what where to go with it?
I've got the DVD box set about 3 feet to the left of me. I watched it. I watched the series surrounding the area where I was writing, um, and I've just recently been watching some later stuff from that. I have all that nearby, so I think it's always best to tell yourself that you're able to watch TV and it's research.
Yeah.
So I spent a day with my feet up, drinking tea, eating chocolate biscuits, just thinking, this is work. How splendid. I love my job. Another episode, don't mind if I do.
Yeah. And when you're writing for audio, and having spoken to a few people in the realm, they say similar things. But do you sit in silence and write, or do you listen to soundtracks of the type of genre or time of atmosphere that you want the audio that you're writing to be set in?
I generally listen to soundtracks when I'm at home.
Yeah,
It'll be, uh, I listen to a lot of John Williams, a lot of Jerry Goldsmith, a lot of Erich Wolfgang Korngold, or is it Wolfgang? It's Erich Wolfgang Korngold from the 40s. He did all the old Errol Flynn swashbucklers. He's very like John Williams. I'm sure he influenced John Williams. I listen to a lot of soundtracks. I listen to a lot of Bond soundtracks as well. Love the Bond soundtracks, especially the John Barry and David Arnold ones. Some of the others, yeah, I'm looking at you, Eric Serra. The Golden Eyes soundtrack was rubbish. Um, but I do listen to that. But a couple of days a week, I'll go and sit in Costa in the centre of Dundee for 3 or 4 hours and type. I was in there yesterday doing a chapter of a novel, and I managed to bang out about 3,500 words in like 4 hours. And when I'm in there, I put headphones on and listen to hard rock.
yeah,
It tends to be something like AC/DC. So oddly, I listen to nothing like what I listen to at home. When I'm there, I've got Highway to Hell blasting in my ears. Even if I'm doing a romantic scene for something, it's just do do do, and it takes me away from where I am.
yeah,
But I generally used to have trouble when I was typing if there was someone singing a song because I'd hear, you know, Springsteen singing, tramps like us, baby, we're born to run. And I'd find that my dialogue was turning into born to run.
yeah,
I'm actually typing what Springsteen's singing. I've got out of the habit of that now,
yeah,
but uh, I still tend to stick to soundtracks when I'm at home.
yeah. And one of the things you've worked on, I think that as a whole, the concept of it works really well because they're they're ever expanding. It's similar to I'm going to say similar to Torchwood. There's multiple iterations of it, and you can go in any direction, and you don't care who's actually dead and who's alive in the program. But what was it like working on Unit the Wrestling?
The which one?
I mispronounced it. My bad. The wasting.
The wasting. Well, Unit was an interesting idea. Got a message from Ian Farrington talking about it. And I came up with the basic stuff about Britain becoming an insular place that didn't like foreigners, and this stuff about the plague at the end. I, I unfortunately feel that it was quite prescient in some ways,
Yeah,
and I wish it wasn't. But I came up with that structure, and Ian put a lot of polish on it,
yeah,
and we decided what we were going to do. Now, the first episode was a setup. It's also right in front of me. Time Heals
yeah,
was sort of a setup to tell us what was where. But the last one was the payoff, and I thought that's really interesting. That's going to be fun to do.
yeah,
And it's probably the thing I've rewritten most in my entire career because I just kept writing it too long. It's a meant to be a 60-minute play, and I think the first version came in at about an hour and 10. And there was so much I wanted to put into it with the plague and with the betrayal and with the characters and with what the Brigadier was going to be doing. And I really wanted to tie it all up because I was really pleased with what we did. I know a lot of people thought it wasn't right. They thought it was 224 and not enough unit.
yeah,
I personally think it couldn't just be nostalgia because it wasn't the cast that was there at the beginning in
yeah,
the old days. You had to, because it wasn't them, it had to be something that had its own identity.
yeah,
And I think we gave it that. I think the Brigadier, we gave him a chance to be intelligent. We gave him a chance to be resourceful. We gave him a chance to be brave. We also gave him a chance to show that he's not dumb. The
yeah,
Brigadier was not a stupid man. He was a highly intelligent man who just happened to not be the brightest guy in the room most of the time because his best friend was the smartest guy in the universe. And it's
yeah,
really hard to be the smartest guy in the room when the doctor's standing next to you. So I wanted the brig to be not dumb. I wanted him to be heroic. And I did meet Nick Courtney at a convention and he was terribly nice about it. Um, and I was very pleased that he enjoyed what we gave him to do.
yeah,
I I think the Waste thing holds up pretty well. I
yeah,
think it's a pretty decent story,
yeah,
and I think the performances in it are good.
mm,
I think David Tennant did a really good job.
yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was roughly around that week he was cast as the Doctor.
yeah,
The week we were in studio, I'm pretty sure that was the week he got it. It was the week he was on the front cover of um, Radio Times as Casanova.
yeah,
So that was interesting. It was really good fun. But like I say, I had to rewrite it hugely.
yeah,
Um, Claire took big chunks out of it. I took chunks out of it, and we had to just keep gutting it. Um, I kind of wish we hadn't had to lose some of the stuff, but we still went at 70 minutes, and that was longer than it should have been.
yeah. And why do you think that, especially, I think on TV it's probably the same, but I think that because Big Finish have got more time to flesh out these things and got more, and it's just there's so much of it. Why do you think that Unit and also Torchwood and Counter Measurement? Why do you think that those type of audios are so fun? Why do you think that there's so much of them and they're so interesting? Why do you think that they're so interesting?
Because you're still in the world of Doctor Who, but
Yeah,
it's a totally different flavor of Doctor Who.
yeah,
And it's really interesting to see how people deal with a situation without the absolute hero being there.
yeah,
The Doctor's the hero that you trust. He's gonna fix everything. You know, the monsters have nightmares about him.
mm,
He's smart. He's gonna come up with an answer. He's not here. What are we gonna do? And I think you get a bit more jeopardy when he's not there. I think the fact that Torchwood was willing to kill its characters
yeah,
really asked questions when you're watching it and you're just going, oh, right. So Tosh is gone.
yeah,
I like Tosh. Damn. Damn. What, Yanto's? What? They're killing? Dead? Are they coming back at the end of the episode? Is there a reset button? Oh, they're dead. That gives it a totally different flavor for me
yeah,
because permanent death of characters in Doctor Who was pretty rare.
yeah,
I think there's increased jeopardy in the Doctor not being there and in knowing that the characters are going to die.
yeah,
And you can get a wee bit grittier and a wee bit grubbier and put a different flavor on what you're giving people, but it stays within the universe you love.
yeah,
Which
and
is why I think the Lethbridge Stewart books and
yeah,
my own Airmen books, we've all got a place. The Faction Paradox books, Iris, you know, Iris and Torchwood couldn't be more different. Iris Wildtime is a lunatic. Torchwood is gritty and grim,
yeah,
but they're in the same universe. And is there anything more wonderful than knowing that you could at some point crash those two together and just say, okay, now what happens?
yeah,
I think it shows the diversity of Doctor Who.
yeah. And I was thinking about this the other day actually, that I think that what makes not just Doctor Who but other franchises that allow time to separate characters off or separate elements of it into its own thing. I think what's really good about it is that it shows that there's more stories to be had. There's stories everywhere, but I think that it shows that there's enough time and there's enough willing to say yes, that the main thing is amazing and we all like it, but we want to know more about this thing. And I think that that's what you get when you get more of an intimate feel to the story being separated.
Well, in Doctor Who, the lead character and the focus always has to be the Doctor.
Yeah,
Having said that, last Saturday's episode was very Doctor-like.
yeah,
And so, what do I know? But mostly it's about the Doctor saving the day, being great, working stuff out, and everybody moves around him
yeah,
or her or, everybody moves around that central character of the Doctor.
yeah,
Once you're actually able to say, I like this character here that's a side, a companion or somebody who is in as a guest, but
yeah,
what we're going to do, because they're only in it for, say, the B plot for most of it.
yeah,
What do you do? But they're really good. The actor's given a great performance. The actress has been incredible. I always thought there was something to be had out of Agatha Christie,
yeah,
um, the Doctor Who, the Fenella Woolgar version.
mm,
But you've got all of that, and you think, oh, wouldn't it be great to spend more time with them? Find out who they are,
yeah,
find out who this version of them are. And if it's a companion, companions spend a lot of their time saying, wow, Doctor, you're brilliant. Particularly in the classic series. It was, how does that work, Doctor? And, geez, you're great, Doctor. And I don't feel bad saying that because it's what they had to do. It fit with what they were doing, and good, and that's absolutely fine. But I wanted to know more about them. I'd like to have known more about a lot of the companions. I mean, I'm really glad Harry has had some fleshing out done to him. I
yeah,
thought Harry was a really interesting character. Sarah got a lot more fleshing out than any of the others,
yeah,
and I think probably deservedly because she was extraordinary. She was vibrant.
yeah,
But I'd like to have spent more time with, say, Ian and Barbara. I'd love to have had an audio series with Ian and Barbara.
yeah,
What happened to them when they came back. I know Paul Mars did some really nice stuff uh, about that for the BBC audios, but I'd like to have got to know Ian and Barbara a
yeah,
bit better. I'd like to have spent more time with some of the other companions. I'd like to have spent more time with Perry after just to find out which of her
yeah,
futures was true.
yeah,
Was she a wrestling manager?
yeah,
Because, or was she a warrior queen? I think I'd like to have spent more time with all of that,
yeah,
and I think the extended media allows us to do that.
yeah. And moving away slightly from Doctor Who, one of the other things you've worked on in the land of TV that is, I think it's for a certain generation, it's deemed with high respect because obviously there's been multiple different versions of this same product, so everyone's got their own version that they're happy that they love. But what would they like working on 2 episodes of Dennis and Nasher?
Um, I didn't just work on two. I worked on the fourth season. I
Yeah,
worked on all of it. Um, I was more or less. There were three of us within DC Thompson at the time. I was editor of the Beano at the time.
yeah,
We did a lot of this. Um, I was. Actually, do I count as editor or was I just acting temporary editor? Um, I was one of those. Anyway, I was in charge of the Beano at the time. And we got taken down to London. We did workshops with writers, and we didn't know we were going to be writing episodes.
Yeah,
We had no idea. We worked with the writers on what they came up with. We tried to push more Beano into it than had been in the previous series. The previous series, Nasher had been much less Nasher and had been more just a dog, and we tried to push back. Nasher's a lunatic. Nasher is utterly bonkers, and
yeah,
he needs to be bonkers because he is the world's wildest dog, and Dennis is the world's wildest boy.
yeah,
So we tried to push all of that back. And when stories were being talked about, we put a lot into it, and we were coming up with basic outlines for stories. We were then told, great, you're going to be script consultants or something on every episode of this series. So it was 52 episodes and 52-minute long interstitials.
yeah,
And we sent a couple of the stories off because we wrote them as short pieces. And then they came back and said, right, okay, you're writing that one. Craig, you're writing that one. And Dan, you're writing that one. And as it turns out, we wound up all writing for the series as well, which was never the intention. But the scripts were coming back into us from the script editor, and we had to give feedback on it all.
yeah,
We had to work on casting, we had to work on animatics, the sort of rough sketch versions. We had to work on character design, casting the actors. We were heavily involved in that. We were pretty much working on the comic during the day and the TV series at night.
yeah,
It was a busy, busy time, but incredibly fun. It was joyful. But one of our partners was in Australia
mm,
for the animation. So if we were having meetings, these meetings would have to be at midnight.
yeah,
So that meant a long day at the office. But it was okay. It was worth it. Um, I got to feel like I was a producer on TV. It was great.
yeah,
And I was writing and, yes, hire that actor. No, fire that guy. He's a bum. And we were, whenever every script came in, we were doing quite a bit of rewriting on it.
yeah,
So you can see the DNA of the three guys from The Office in pretty much every episode of that fourth season. It
yeah,
was great fun.
yeah,
One of the most joyful and knackering things I've ever done.
yeah. Why do you think that Beano in itself is still so beloved, like it's always been?
There's an understanding within the Beano that you don't change it too much.
Yeah,
You evolve it. It's evolution, not revolution with the Beano.
yeah,
People say, oh, the Beano is not what it was when I was a kid. Well, no, it's not, and it shouldn't be. But you can recognize it. The Beano from 1951 wasn't the same as the Beano from 1938.
yeah,
But from 1951 onwards, you can look at it and go, yeah, you know, I can kind of see naughty kids. Around the late 70s, the naughty kids start to get their own way. You know, all the characters start to appear in the 50s. So you've now got great grandparents, grandparents, parents, and kids who've all read the same comic, read the same characters. Yes, they've changed in look. Yes, the storytelling techniques have evolved. Certainly, when I was starting to get good at the job in the 90s, we were moving into the point where there wasn't always a moral ending. Sometimes the kids actually got away with being naughty.
yeah,
The corporal punishment was long gone by the time I turned up.
yeah,
So we'd had to use punishments like, taking away their TV privileges and now
yeah,
you take away their mobile phone or something. But I think the characters are strong. The writing is always strong. The artwork is always strong. But there's sort of a national memory of it.
yeah,
It's part of the brickwork of everybody's childhood now. We all remember it. We all remember Dennis. Everybody knows Dennis.
yeah,
Even if you don't, even if you were never really a reader of it, you know what Dennis the Menace looks like. You know what Minnie the Minx looks like. Personally, I always thought Bash Street Kids was the best thing in the world.
yeah,
Uh, Partly because the guy who drew it all the time I was there, Dave Sutherland, was, I think, the most important and probably best artist Thompson's ever had.
yeah,
Uh, Also, the nicest man in the world. Just a gloriously wonderful man who was grandfather to everybody in the comic, and
yeah,
we loved him.
yeah, yeah,
And you could see the warmth in his work that was actually emanating from him. So I just think there's a warmth from it that radiates out to the readers that goes through generations.
and I think that what also helps, and I think that this is the case for everything. But what also helps is that kids also that they might have kids that might have never read the comic also love the characters anyway because of them appearing on the screen. And I think that also helps keep a legacy of a character alive. If you can read the character doing some adventures, then you can watch the characters do more adventures. And I think that that's what helps. Do you think that's what helps keep the legacy of characters in all medium alive if they're always around in different forms.
It always helps that you can be seen.
Yeah,
If your bottom line for media stuff is that we are an industry, we are a business, and we sell. So if you're going to sell, you have to be seen.
yeah,
And being on TV is the best way to be seen. The best advert for the comic is a TV series.
yeah,
And even if people were looking at it going, that's not the Dennis I remember because he's a bit gentler, it's still Dennis and he's
yeah,
still being Dennis. He's just reflecting today. And you still think, yeah, he's being Dennis. And that's today's kids looking at their Dennis.
yeah,
And the kids who look at it in 20 years will see a different Dennis. But the parents will still look at it and think, yeah, that's still my Dennis.
yeah,
And it being around permanently on TV like that, and it does seem to rotate non-stop somewhere on TV, is a huge thing for keeping the character in the consciousness of everyone.
yeah,
And also working as a as an advert for the comic. And I'm even though I haven't written for the comic for a decade,
yeah,
I still have a huge fondness for the comic and the people who work on it because they're my friends. I'm in touch with them most days. I was in touch with two of them today.
right,
So I want them being able to do well because I think it's a wonderful and beautiful thing.
yeah. And do you think that because of this, do you think it'll help get more kids and more young adults into reading because they might see the character on TV and go, I want to see more, and then I'll pick up the comic. Do you think that will help people get into reading more?
One of the things we found out and was through, about 25 years ago, we started to get a lot of this,
Yeah,
was teachers telling us or phoning us and writing and asking, could you send us some old comics, please? Because I'm struggling to get kids to read books,
yeah,
but they will read comics. And if I can get them reading comics, comics are the gateway drug onto chapter books.
yeah,
So we would always make a point of working with schools to get comics to them. And I think it's incredibly important that comics, because when we start writing comics, at least when I started, I was told always be visual so that the story can be told visually.
yeah,
And then once they can read, they can pick up more. And if you can get a kid to tell the story by reading it, great. But once they're reading and they're seeing the words and they're getting extra laughs from the words, I think that's the jump that gets them to go and say, okay, I'll pick up a book. I'll pick up, I don't know, The Gruffalo or The Tiger Who Came, or whatever. They'll
yeah,
pick up whatever it is and they'll keep reading. Hopefully, some of them will pick up old Target novelizations and fall in love with those
yeah,
because they should. But we did find that a lot of teachers were desperate to get comics into their classroom to get kids reading, which is a huge change from back in the 50s. Because in the 1950s, comics were seen as something disposable and grubby and not good for kids to be seen with.
yeah,
They wanted kids to be holding books rather than comics. Um, it's different now, and comics really are a very important way of getting kids into reading. And reading is vital.
yeah,
It's just education of all sorts is the most important thing, but I think reading opens up a universe to you. Fiction, fact, potential. You can find anything in books.
yeah. And do you think that's why the novelizations of Doctor Who are still so popular? Because you get kids that really enjoy watching on TV, and then because they've got more time in a book, some elements are fleshed out. Do you think that's why the novelizations are still widely popular?
I don't know who the current novelizations are aimed at. They feel a bit more mature than a lot of the ones when I was sort of 10, 12 years old. But I gave a set of 10 of them to my great niece, who
Yeah,
is, I'm not going to say how old she is because if I get it wrong, she'll be upset with me. She's either, no, she's not 13 yet, she's 12.
yeah,
So I gave her a set of 12 of 10 of these novelizations,
yeah,
and I think she's enjoying them
yeah,
with not quite the same voracious reading that I did of them, but she's
yeah,
enjoying them. And there are things in there that will spark her interest because she loves to read anyway.
mm,
But the Witchfinders will have her going to find out about witches.
yeah,
The way the Crusaders made me go and find out about crusades.
yeah,
And the horror of Fang Rock made me interested in lighthouses.
yeah,
And when the Aztecs came out, I went and read a lot about Aztecs.
yeah,
I think Doctor Who in literature form back in those days was probably an index card for me to go to the library.
yeah,
You know, what's this one about? Oh, okay. I'll go and read a book on that because I want to be cleverer than my mates when we're talking about it.
yeah,
Because I was a smug little swine. Um, Now I'm a smug old swine. Um, but I do think Doctor Who, by its nature, by the fact that its hero is all about being empathic and clever and knowing things, I think that makes it a perfect fit for books, for the
yeah,
book form.
yeah, yeah. And when you're working with the form of Doctor, do you prefer writing Doctor Who in book form, or do you think that you get more out of it when you're writing it for audio?
Oh, that is a very good question. I love writing audio. I love writing scripts. Because I started writing as doing scripts for comics.
Yeah,
Scripts are where I always go back to.
mm,
I always feel very, very at home. If I'm ever feeling that my writing of a novel is going slowly or it's just not feeling right, I'll cheat and I will write that piece of it as a script. I'll just write the dialogue
mm,
so that I can get the story moving. And I'm never stuck when I'm writing just dialogue, dialogue, dialogue. The story's moving. And that tells me what I have to go back and fill in. And I just sort of novelize around it, but in long form. When I did the Tomorrow People novel, I wrote that as a four-part script before I wrote it as a novel. I wrote all of the dialogue and then just planked that down and thought, well, of my X thousand words, I've got, oh, well, looky at that. I've got 9,000 words done. I'm brilliant. This is good. I'm well into it already. I did that because I wanted it to have the structure and feel of an episodic show.
yeah,
But I also found I've I've done it on quite a few things, and I find even when I'm doing Doctor Who stuff,
mm,
that can help because it makes the characterization in the dialogue and what they're saying and how they're feeling far more immediate than if I have to stop and do, say, a 250 word piece of exposition that explains something. And then when I go back, it's, I might have lost the impetus of what I was doing. So I do prefer, uh, I'm not going to say I prefer scripts, but I find scripts easier.
Yeah,
But I think prose gives me a chance to be a bit cleverer and a little bit, uh, yeah, just do stuff that's a little bit more complex.
yeah. And we've got to this point in the interview where people have got to know you more. What advice, from your own experience, what advice would you give anyone that wants to get into the world of writing?
Read, read voraciously, read widely, read different subjects, read different genres. If you want to write science fiction, go and read Jane Austen. Nothing to do with science fiction, but you'll find characterization there. And you need characterization no matter what you're going to do. Read in so many different genres. You will learn techniques just from reading. And don't be obsessed with writing just for one genre or for one thing. Be obsessed with writing. Write, write for quality. Don't write with your heart. Write what you love, but don't restrict yourself. And always keep asking questions and keep pushing yourself. Push yourself out of your comfort zone. Push yourself to write things you don't like. David Bowie always said you had to get out of your comfort zone to do your best work. That's a bad paraphrase to a far greater quote by a far wiser man. But he's right. You have to get out of your comfort zone. But you have to read and you have to just write. Write and keep writing. And even if it's rubbish when you start, doesn't matter. My first attempts were absolutely garbage. They were rotten. I was reading something I wrote back in the 90s. If I could have gone back to see myself in those days, I'd have given myself a thick ear. I said, never do that again. Never ever pick up a pen.
Yeah,
But I stuck at it and I think I got a little bit better because I read and I put in the time. And if somebody gave me constructive advice, I listened.
yeah,
There's something Terence Dicks said at one point, and I've always thought that was really important. And I've got it pinned above my board here. It just says structure, structure, structure.
yeah,
And so you always structure your story. Know the structure of your story, know where it's going, know what your characters are getting out of it. At least that's for me anyway. I know some people write not knowing anything about what's coming. I couldn't do that. I'd be panicking by the second paragraph.
yeah. And and I don't know how much you're allowed to say on this because NDAs are galore these days. But what upcoming that you're allowed to talk about? What upcoming projects have you got that you're allowed to speak about? That you're excited for people to see, hear, or read?
Right. Well, I just had a book come out yesterday
Yeah,
called The 49 Steps. You may have heard of the 39 Steps.
yeah,
Well, this is the 49 Steps, and it's the 39 Steps was set at the start of World War One. This is set at the start of World War Two. Same character, Richard Hannay, and he is again trying to save Britain from war.
yeah,
That came out yesterday. The first couple of bits of feedback to it have been really quite positive, and I'm really pleased about that. I have just written a little something for Candy Jar, which I'm not going to say any more about, other than I'm really quite pleased with it, and I always like working for Candy Jar.
yeah,
Um, I've got another novel just about finished.
mm,
Uh, there's a few bits and pieces for Obverse. I've got another RMM novel to write, uh, which is again relating to World War II and Nazis.
Yeah.
I've done an audio play which I cannot talk about. I'm planning to go back and do some stuff for the producer over in the States. Uh, Plus, I've got some comic stuff to do, which I haven't done for a long time. I'm going to be writing for comics, and I'd really like to go back and do some more issues of Commando
Yeah.
because I've written, I don't know, 35 issues of Commando, but I've only written one in the last 5 years because I was really quite unwell for a long time. But since I recovered, I've had the urge to write Commando.
Yeah.
So I'm going to.
Yeah.
I want to. I want to get back into that because I enjoy Commando.
Yeah. And when you're writing, do you think it's easier to write for things for you things that you know of, or do you think that it's harder to write when you write things like when you write for a radio place for America? Do you think it's easy writing for stuff you know in the UK, or do you think it's harder to write for stuff like writing audio plays in America for America?
Writing for America is interesting because the rules for them are slightly different. Um, I wrote a Halloween piece for them, which I was really pleased with.
Yeah,
The version that came out was not quite my cup of tea, but because it was stuff happened. But when I was writing that, I was aware that I couldn't be too scary.
yeah,
I couldn't use damn. I couldn't use hell.
mm,
And the fact that the villain of the piece was going to turn out to be the devil
yeah,
caused me an immense amount of trouble. I wouldn't have had any bother with that here in the UK.
yeah,
So I have to be aware. I also have to be aware that if I'm writing for America, I can't use a word like pavement.
yeah,
I have to use sidewalk. And I got picked up for calling something a car park. It's a parking lot. So I have to do a sort of an American edit if I'm writing anything for over there.
yeah,
But I found I always enjoy doing it because I love the company that I work with, and the people I work with over there are really good friends.
yeah,
So I enjoy it, but I find the majority of what I do is based on stuff that I loved as a kid.
yeah,
So the majority of my career has been basically me going back to being 8 or 9 year old me.
yeah,
And I've always enjoyed that. I like being I like being able to revisit my childhood
yeah,
because I've never grown up and I'm not going to. So there, you can't make me.
yeah. And so there we have it. Thank you for letting me interview you.
You are most welcome. I've talked about my favorite thing in the world, me.
Yeah. And thank you guys for watching. There'll be more from me very soon, e.g. tomorrow, because why would there not be more from me? I'm everywhere and I'm nowhere all at once. That's what happens when you do too much. You're everywhere and people probably get fed up with you. And it's my own, well, it's not my own fault, it's my own creative genius. So it's your own fault for watching it all. Thank you guys for watching. Time Out. Bye bye.